approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness.
And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day.
God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on this good earth.
On December 21st, 1968, Apollo 8 was the first crewed spacecraft to successfully orbit the moon and then return to Earth. The Apollo 8 crew were also the first to witness and photograph the Earthrise. Did you see that in the clip? Beautiful, huh? Frank Borman, William A. Anders, and James Lovell Jr. were the ones that made up the crew. I thought it was interesting that each of them took some verses to read. There was 3 different voices there. It took 68 hours, almost 3 days, to travel the distance to the moon. And the crew orbited the moon 10 times over the course of 20 hours during that time. They made a Christmas Eve television broadcast in which they read the first 10 verses from the book of Genesis. The crew then wished everyone back on Earth a Merry Christmas. Pretty amazing to most. Being up amongst the stars like that, even the Christmas star. Miraculous? Yes. With the exception of one who didn't think it so miraculous, a woman by the name of Madeline Murray O'Hare, who was an activist and founded the group American Atheists. She filed a lawsuit against NASA, suing the U.S. government against violations of the First Amendment because of the reading of Genesis on a government-sponsored mission. O'Hare was also known for using very vulgar language in a professional setting. She didn't care. She was also named the most hated woman in America by Life magazine in 1964. O'Hare and her family met a horrific end. They ended up being murdered by members of their own atheist group in which she had founded. There's more details about that. You can Google that, but it is pretty horrific. So interesting that this woman who professed that there was no God and led her life striving to do all that she could to stomp out the light of the world would meet this kind of an end. Huh? And yet here are these 3 astronauts getting an up-close and personal look at the earth and the moon and the stars and God's beautiful creation. And how could one not be in awe? This light versus darkness. So today we continue on with our God and Space sermon series, and I thought we could have just a little bit of fun during these dog days of summer when it feels hotter than hot outside, and instead we could pretend that it was December. with A Christmas in July, singing these few Christmas hymns that mention the star. And we'll take a look at a few video clips from this animated movie, The Star. Braden Marin recommended this movie to me back in December, and I said I had not seen it yet, but it is available on Netflix, and I do highly recommend it for big and little, so you can go home and view that. And even as we have a little bit of fun singing these so-called Christmas hymns today in the air conditioning, it reminds us that the incarnation of Christ is to be celebrated every single day, not just for a few weeks during Advent and Christmas and Epiphany, but rather every day should be a new epiphany that this God of ours stepped down into our lives and became one of us in order to save us. So we know about the birth announcement. This virgin birth through Mary's consent is indeed the method in which God used to become flesh and dwell among us. We only get here what Scripture tells us, that the angel Gabriel appeared to her when she was just a young teenager, and that even though she was shocked and wondered how all of this stuff was going to work, Mary surrendered to the will of God. Let it be according to your will. What has God asked you to do that you have said, let it be according to your will? Perhaps there was a hard thing in your life. You weren't sure that you would get through it. Perhaps God is calling you now to do a hard thing, something that you know there is no way unless God makes the way. I remember very vividly as I was sorting out God's call upon my life, whether to enter ministry or not, and I also remember very vividly how darkness was also trying to stomp out that light. It was a very personal time between God and I, and that song, He Walks With Me and He Talks With Me and He Tells Me That I Am His Own, became very real to me. I can imagine just a little bit of how Mary and Joseph might have felt as this miraculous event not only changed their lives, and it also changed humanity forever. It changed our lives. God was about to become one of us. Let's watch clip 2. I love how God used the star to guide the way, don't you? For the wise men and for the shepherds. Outcasts. Neither of these groups of people were in the in crowd. Although most of the shepherds were probably of Jewish descent, they certainly were not the temple crowd. They weren't the guys who attended church. They weren't even what you would call blue collar, even lower than that, and smellier too. Sheep herders. I love how God used them, and I love that when God became a man, He referred to Himself as one of them. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am the way, the truth, and the life. God did not say, I am the temple priest, and you have to mimic me. God did say, I am the good shepherd, and you should go after that one lost lamb and bring them back into my flock. These wise guys were foreigners, not Jews, but this crazy star showed up and wowed them. And even though they were not Jews, they were scholars, and they knew about the prophecy of this new king. And so God used the star, and He used their intellect, and He used their hearts in order to accomplish His will. Because God knows what we love, and God knows what we don't love. And sometimes He uses both to stretch us, and to move us, and to love on us, and especially to draw us closer. So when have you been wowed by God, and your light is shining so brightly? And then, of course, there will be people who are unable to see your light. and they're going to try to stomp it out. King Herod tried to stomp out that light, and he thought that if he just mass murdered a whole bunch of baby boys in Bethlehem, that would take care of the so-called threat to him. And honestly, why did he feel so threatened? Because he felt threatened of this inner darkness of greed and envy and insecurity and all of those things that are not from God, but rather from the evil one. We all experience these emotions in our lives from time to time, and Satan delights in it when we do. But it takes our attention off of the light, you see, and it robs our sleep, and it keeps us up at night. Ever been there? And so then what? Well, talking with a light helps. Prayer. Have you ever laid awake praying? Or maybe you have woken yourself up praying. Yeah? Focusing intently on that light. Not only shines light into our lives, but it also shines light onto those whom we're praying over. It casts the light, just like on Christmas Eve when we sing Silent Night together with the lights off here, and we light one candle, and then another candle, and another candle. Do you see that image in your mind? Beautiful, isn't it? Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. And even though this event, or even when that an event or a circumstance or our world around us might not be calm, and it might not be bright in the world's perception of things, you are in that moment because you are focusing on the light, the one who remains constant in the midst of the storm, Jesus. You see? Can you see? Can you see the light? Clip 4, please.
Fear not. I bring good tidings of great joy. For unto you is born this day a Savior, Christ the Lord.
Told you it was important.
I just want to be a sheep, ba, 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 ba. I just want to be a sheep, ba, 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 ba. So when we focus on the light and we have the courage to say, hey guys, look, people will follow the star, people will follow the light, and they will see it in you. They will see in and through you, and you become a flashlight for Jesus Christ, leading the way to Jesus. And you might say, shucks, I'm no flashlight. Yes, friends, you are. There will be times in our lives when our batteries become a little bit low because even Duracells weaken, and we need each other to keep that path illuminated. But this light, this God-made flash, never goes out, and it keeps shining brightly and helps us to keep on keeping on when the world around us seems to darken. There's strength in numbers, and there is joy in the journey as we walk together. Last clip, the Nativity. Do you think that it stomped out their light? Even in the midst of this lawsuit, do you think they said to themselves, man, I wish I would have never read those 10 verses of the Bible while seeing a star up close and personal? Doubtful. We know that Buzz Aldrin, before he went moonwalking, remembered Jesus. He remembered first and foremost that he was indeed a child of the Most High God. And we know that there are many courageous men and women who proclaim Christ as Lord every single day, even though it might be risky. God is still calling us to go and to tell and to go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere that Jesus Christ is born. Before Apollo 8, there was the cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin. He was the first person in space. He said in a news telecast that he didn't see God up there, speaking of his time in space, but that's okay, because God came down here. Emmanuel, God is with us. from the very beginning until the very end. So do not fear. Keep following the star and keep letting your light shine. And all God's people say,